Welcome to Rapid Harmony. I'm Kyle Emanuel Brown. This is a space for high-achieving souls who want more than outcomes. You want resonance, you want truth, you want a life that moves with purpose instead of pressure. Here, we explore success with the soul and direction with depth. We slow things down just enough to hear your own wisdom again. We breathe, we question, we remember the part of you that never needed permission to leave. Every conversation is an invitation to trust yourself more than the noise around you, and live from that clarity that rises when you stop forcing and start listening. Take a breath, settle in, let's begin. So what if your body's been telling you the truth for years, but you've just been overriding it and too busy to override it to listen?
Yeah, or not recognizing it. Yeah, not listening. I think that's a big part. And I think this is one of the challenges that we have in society is that we have lost the ability to hear what our body is saying to us. You know, I've talked about it a lot of times, is that when your body is dehydrated, when it needs hydration, what signal does it send?
Well, through the vagus.
Thirst.
Yeah.
It makes you're
getting thirst.
And if your body needs energy or nutrients, what signal does it send?
Yeah, it's good. Hunger.
Mm-hmm. So the question is, what is anxiety? You know, right now we look at anxiety as, oh, the kids have eaten too much sugar or they've done something like that. They're burning energy. But what we've learned is that your body has a thing called the endocannabinoid system. Mm-hmm. We learned this through the study of cannabis.
That's right.
And when you move, your body creates a ligand, it creates a molecule called anandamide. Anandamide lands on the CB1, CB2 receptors and causes, it's called the Zen Molecule. So I contend that anxiety is your body saying move, because you need to produce anandamide so that you can get back. And this is about listening to the body and understanding the signal. You know, right now we live in a mismatched state. We have a body that evolved. We won the evolution because we adapted. Well, now we live in states where we don't have to adapt. Our temperature's controlled, our floors are flat, we don't have to climb, there's all these things. Food readily available, we don't have to go out and hunt food. You know, there's a reversal that we used to get hungry and then go hunt. Now we hunt and then get hungry.
Right.
And it's flipped. So I contend that our environment, we're living in a dramatic mismatch in our environment.
100% agree. I think one of the interesting things is that we've eliminated ourselves from the animal kingdom and the food chain to the point we've been delusional, thinking that we're not even an animal. And the plus is, you know, that we don't have to worry about any animals hunting us down, except for some cougars maybe some cougars at Whole Foods when we're out shopping for some almond milk. But we also have lost understanding of symbiosis in nature.
Yeah, like I said, I think that there's a dramatic mismatch. You know, I do a lecture on longevity, and my first slide is 2 orcas in the wild and 2 orcas in captivity. And the orcas in captivity, their dorsal fins turn over, but the orcas in the wild, their dorsal fins are straight. So while you can keep an orca alive in an aquarium, there's not enough environmental force for them to express their DNA of a straight dorsal fin. And then my next slide is lions. So if you look at a photo, mammals that lived in the old zoos that were the concrete blocks and the steel cages and so forth, those animals lived an average of 3.5 years. They had anxiety, they had digestive problems, not unlike your neighbor. But you take that same lion and put it in an enriched environment, and they live full lives, they reproduce, they do great. Well, my next slide now is of a lab rat. If you take a lab rat and you put them in a research pen, and you put in a bottle of opiate-laced water and a bottle of regular water, they will drink the opiate-laced water until they die. If you take that same rat and put them in an enriched environment, they won't touch the opiate water. They will only drink the clean water. So the question I have today is that, is our drug problem a result of opiates or lack of environment? So, and then my next slide after that is a big glass building with hands up on the glass. And I say, which side of the aquarium do you live on? What is going on in your life that you're more like the orca, the lion, or the lab rat? And how do you modify that environment to most effectively take the advantage of our evolutionary success, our ability to adapt, and then that's how the rest of the lecture goes.
I love that. And there's this finding of a balance between we need the environmental stressors to adapt and overcome and get resilient and strong, but we also want to make sure we're in a place where neurologically we feel safe.
Yeah, those go hand in hand. That doesn't, I've said this many times, in the fact that if you're born in a rattlesnake pit, the only way you survive is being hypervigilant.
Right.
Now, if I take you out of the rattlesnake pit and I put you in a house full of bunnies, okay, there's no threat to your life, but you are still hypervigilant, because what we've learned, and this is what I learned working in the cannabis industry, it was really interesting that there was a really good paper done on fear conditioning in mice and dogs. And what they saw was that in fear conditioning, that they put these animals in a cage and there's an electric shock, and that's where the fear comes from. But what we know is that there is a dramatic and sustained drop of anandamide, what's called as the Zen molecule, or an endocannabinoid, that your body produces when you exercise. Well, there's a drop of that anandamide in the amygdala, the fear sensing part of the brain.
Right.
And if you think about the mechanism for hypervigilance, that seems like a pretty good mechanism. Now, you can't study this in humans because you can't anatomically dissect the brain. But when and I think about humans in a snake pit. So
Right.
if you take a bunch of kids, do you remember the movie American Graffiti?
Oh, yeah.
Great movie. And it's 3 days or a day or the night before these kids go off to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And you take these kids, lots of fear. You take these kids, you drop them into the snake pit of Vietnam. Okay. The only way you get out of that is hypervigilance. That's the only way. Okay. And they come home. Well, I'm old enough to remember when these veterans are coming home, they loved cannabis. Well, if we know that anandamide has permanently dropped in the system, and the only way to restore any level of homeostasis or any level of peace is to exogenally consume it, that's why people smoke dope.
Right.
Okay. And it makes a lot of sense to me. Okay. Now, unfortunately, over time, this cannabis industry's kind of gotten warped a little bit. Way too much THC, and we're not. I think we're going to have to reschedule it to really get the medical benefits that can come out of that. But that's what we do with our company, Mode and Method, is we use cannabis extracts in a strategic process to meet the needs of your autonomic nervous system and improve HRV. The product's called HRV Plus. Yeah. But that's where the science comes from, and it's why it's so important.
And so it's the CBD that they're ingesting that is creating that,
I don't think it's the CBD.
So it's a THC, but
no, it's not THC either.
Then what is it?
So the plant produces what's called THCA and CBDA, the acid.
Okay.
We don't mess with any of the THCs.
Right.
Okay. But CBDA, what we know is CBDA lands on most of the same receptors that anandamide lands on and innervates. Okay. So very much a CBDA. CBD has a benefit. So CBD is beneficial from the standpoint, there is an enzyme called FAAH that breaks down anandamide. CBD interferes with FAAH. So your anandamide maintains longer.
Okay.
Okay. So that's where the benefit comes. The CBDA is much more beneficial. And then there's other cannabinoids in there. Beta caryophyllene is we call it a terpene, but they call it a dietary cannabinoid because it's in black pepper and it's in some other plants. Okay. Well, it acts a lot like CBDA, even if it's my favorite. If I had to restrict my cannabinoids to one, I would go beta caryophyllene. Oh. And then we back that up with some other products to lower inflammation, and we can get into that as we go. But CBD is a little overrated in its benefits. CBDA is excellent. Beta caryophyllene is excellent.
Awesome. I love it. And for context, if you're listening at home, we know that most high achievers are trained to push harder, they're grinding longer, they're ignoring the signals. But one of the most powerful performance indicators isn't really discipline, your calendar, willpower, but it's actually heart rate variability, right?
Yeah, it's bandwidth. When you use the word discipline, you got to be really careful with that word. we think people are successful because they're more disciplined. We like to use ego-driven kind of terms, and I think
Right.
you have to be careful. I'm going to go way off on a vector here. I believe it comes down to love.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I am disciplined when I have something that I love and I'm willing to pursue and sacrifice for. This is what I learned from the head wrestling coach at Ohio State, Tom Ryan, when I was there. I didn't know this when I was a wrestler, but when I was back working there 15 through 18, so I learned from Tom. And I am most disciplined when something I need to do is something that I love.
Yes.
And he relates it, he is a very evangelical Christian. He relates it to Christ's love of human and willing to sacrifice himself for it. Yeah. And he puts it in the context in the community. Listen, if you love wrestling, you're willing to sacrifice for it. You're willing to make the social sacrifices that other students may not be willing to make in order to be a great wrestler. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think there's a lot.
So it's more of a devotion than it is a discipline, but you're doing it because you're fueled by enthusiasm.
Yeah, it's
instead of a willpower move.
You know what? A carrot will get you a lot further than a whip.
Yeah.
And I can whip a horse, or I can put a carrot on a stick, and I got a feeling the carrot on the stick is going to get me a lot further.
I'm a huge fan. If you were talking about different chemicals that can affect that Zen state. Mm-hmm. And, having gone to Indiana, I looked at two different coaching philosophies. One is I'm at Indiana playing water polo when we had Bobby Knight there.
Right.
And we had that psychological philosophy where no names on the back of your jerseys, everybody's the same.
Yep.
And then you had, as a person who grew up in Chicago in the 90s, I had the Zen master, right? Where he focused on, I'm going to bring out the greatness in you. And he was the one person who was able to bring out the greatness in Dennis Rodman for a sustained period of time.
Sure.
And so, one is a stick, one is a carrot approach. Both can get different levels of greatness, but to me, there's a sustained greatness and a true greatness, and one is more soul-fueled greatness, where they're actually happy, not just workhorses.
Yeah, it's there may be a lot of great people out there that we never know about. They function in their own space, and there's a huge amount of love, and there's a huge amount of commitment. Yeah. And I think there's people like that to do that every day. And I think as humans who want to perform, it's best for us to examine, okay, who are these, too many times the spotlight damages ego, magnifies it, pollutes it, things like that. So I think a lot of times it's critical that we take a step back and make sure that we're working. I love watching Caitlin Clark right now. Mm-hmm. Speaking of Indiana basketball, and her teammate Sophie Cunningham. Sophie Cunningham. No one knew who Sophie Cunningham was. She played at Missouri, was down at Phoenix. They bring her into Indiana. And she is fierce. She is fierce in her protection of Caitlin Clark. Mm. And Caitlin Clark, I don't see as a high ego person.
No.
Now I see as a ferocious competitor.
Right.
Ferocious. You don't want to be on the other side of her in the quest for a goal. But I think this is the thing that we work on. So, as we go through life, whether you're a business person or whether you're a coach or an athlete, I think you take a step back and have that compassion and embrace the love of the pursuit, the love of the game. I don't care if you win the match or not. Do you love preparing for it? It's the love and willingness to prepare that determines. And you know what? I was talking to my daughter about this, that in wrestling, by the time you get to the semifinals of the national tournament, so there's 4 guys in that weight class. It's damn close to a coin flip who wins the matches. When you get to the finals, it is a coin flip. Okay. And now the sport's getting better. It may be the 8 finals. It may be that round of 8, the 8 guys. They've gotten really good. And we see this in a lot of sports. Women's lacrosse starts today. The next round, and I was talking to my daughter about it. There's 4 pretty clear leaders in this group. that you would expect to see in a Final Four. But as the sport evolves, someone gets knocked off. And, we had a coach, a lesson I learned back when I was an athlete. On a given day, anybody can be beaten.
Right.
Anybody. You always have to remember that. And we see upsets, we see these things. And it's important to keep that in mind that, if they make the mistake, I've got to be there to take advantage of it.
And you had this really unique background coming into everything that you're doing now, where you were coaching over at Ohio State and wrestling. What got you ended up in the applied, sports psychology place?
Science. Well, physiology.
Physiology.
It goes back to my origin story. I grew up in Eastern Ohio, in the middle of the strip pits over there, and we raised beef cattle. My dad had a big farm. My dad had put together a big farm. And at one point in time, we had 1,000 head of cattle. And it was very Yellowstone. Okay. It was horses and motorcycles and branding and the whole thing.
Yeah.
We never took anybody to the train station, but it was still very Yellowstone. I hope you get the,
yeah.
But we grew up in a house. The house that we grew up in, my dad bought the house in 25 acres for $2,500.
Oof.
And this would have been 1972, 71. The house, we're in the middle of coal country. So it had been strip mined. Well, the house had deep mines cut around the house underground.
Okay.
We didn't know this, but the house had no windows, no gas, no electric, no heat, nothing. It was the shell of a house. And we completely remodeled it. Well, we tried to drill a well and it didn't work. We couldn't get water. So there was a creek on the other side of the road that we went down and put a pump house in and pumped the water up to the house. In the summertime, it works great.
Okay.
In the wintertime, it froze.
Oof.
So we could count on our water freezing in the house for a month to 2 months a year. We had no circulating water in the house. Now you can imagine adapting to that. Yeah. Well, one of the ways we adapted to it was if I didn't wrestle, I didn't have a warm shower that day. Now I'm not saying that I had the love of wrestling.
Yeah.
But I figured out how to survive.
All right.
You figured out how to, and oh, by the way, along the way, you got better. Just showing up is a big part of that. So get through. Was a decent high school wrestler. I went to Ohio State. There was no choice. Parents said you're going to college. So I was planning on going home and feeding beef cattle. Go to Ohio State. I sit through my first ag econ class, and I'm like, okay, making a living farming is nuts. I mean, it's nuts. At the same time, I was struggling with injury. I was cutting way too much weight. I would cut from like 230 to 177 my freshman year. Okay. Had injuries. Cut from 240, 235 to 190 my sophomore year. Had injuries. I said, looking for answers, but you got to get stronger. So I start lifting. I start getting strong, and I become a heavyweight. And all of a sudden, I'm competitive. That's where my love of exercise physiology came into play. And it was clear to me at that point, that's where I wanted to spend my life. Finished up my undergraduate, did my graduate work in exercise phys, and have been working in human performance ever since.
So one thing, growing up on a cattle ranch versus growing up in the gym bodybuilding as a foundation, there's much more of a functional moving the weight through instead of just up and down.
Right.
And so you had that experience by sheer default. So it was almost like your obstacle, right. Yeah. Your obstacle ended up being probably one of your best foundational bone joint strength off the charts.
We lost my older brother a few years ago, and he and I were having a conversation one day about there is no equal in conditioning than throwing 10,000 bales of hay a day.
Yeah.
Okay, there's nothing like it. Now, first of all, it takes all day. Okay, it's not 30 minutes in the gym, 40 minutes an hour, it's all day.
Jeez.
And it's up and down and through
and rotational.
Yes.
Yeah.
And your grip strength is amazing. And so that was a huge advantage. And that wasn't training, that was just living.
Right.
So that was a big part. And so that was a benefit. The other thing we tell the story that the water froze in the house. But you still need water in the house. You still need water to do things. You heat it on some. So we had a creek down below the road that we would go down. I had two brothers. And one was 5 years younger than I, so he wasn't quite really into it. My older brother and I we went at it.
Yeah.
But we'd go down to the creek and we'd fill up 4 or 5 gallon buckets apiece. Now, we're not full, probably 3.5, 4 gallons in the bucket, but you put 2 in one hand and 2 in the other. And you had a choice. You can walk the long way around the barn, or you can go up the steep hill. And the steep hill was, you got to the bottom of it, you sat the buckets down, you kind of got your act together, you pick them up, you hike them up, because this hill's 45 degrees, and you sprint up this hill. And you get to the top, you can't set them down at the top. You've got to lift them over the guardrail and set them down, or else they spill and you got to go do it again. And we would do this in the snow. I mean, and it's legend in our family, going back to carrying the water up the hill was a determining factor in our success as athletes. My mom and dad had 3 boys. Those 3 boys have 6 kids. So of the 9 of us, 5 have been varsity athletes at Ohio State.
Wow.
2 more have been varsity athletes, one at Kent State, one at Columbus, one at Southern Charleston, and the other one was a Navy SEAL. So kind of a group of high performers. Why were we high performers? It's not because someone was behind us with a whip. Oh. It's because we had to figure out life. And
you gamified it.
There's a gamification, but there's also the ability to focus, to not concentrate on the extraneous bullshit. And I think we were able to teach that to our children. That, listen, I distinctly remember winning the Big Ten title at Northwestern University. My daughter then went on to coach there and won a national title with the Lock.
That's incredible.
But I remember finishing up that match. My younger brother was 5 years younger than I was. So most of the time, my parents didn't get to come see me wrestle.
Right.
Because they were managing my younger brother. So I get to Big Tens. I'm the number 4 seed. I'm not expected to win. But I wanted that 4th seed. Probably the best guy in the weight class was the number 2
Number
seed.
2? Yeah, there.
And the number 2 and 3, I'd lost to that season. But the number 1 seed, who had beaten the other 2, I'd beaten the year before and beaten the thunder out of them. And I'm like, okay, I have I want this guy. I want this side of the bracket. And I told the coaches, get me the number 4 seed. And they did. They said, that's easy. That's the easiest, they ever had. So I wrestled my way through. I wrestled really good and I win a Big Ten title. And I remember calling my mom. This is the second time this has happened today, and I need to get my estrogen adjusted.
I got you.
That's love of the sport.
Yeah.
You don't call parents who have driven you.
No.
And I think this is the challenge, is how do we develop a love of what we do? How do we instill that in people so that they're able to fully realize physically, cognitively, emotionally, the whole thing, the experience? And now we can see this with wearable technology, with things like that. We're now able to see much of this through things like heart rate variability, using wearable technology, getting people prepared for this. We experienced it. Yeah. And it was luck of the draw. It was random. We did what we think is right. Now, again, as a parent now that's raised an athlete that's done well, it did really good. But the number 1 predictor of whether a kid will make it in college athletics is whether their parents were college athletes. That's not necessarily genetics. I don't need to tell you, because you've been there, the importance of being able to focus, of turn off the external events. That's right. No one in the stands counts. No. Okay. This is one of the things that drives me crazy about watching young athletes today, is they're so ready to demonstrate their celebration. When I'm like, kid, pick up your effing lunchbox and go back to work. Okay. Because there's going to be someone come along that's going to whip your ass. And I no parades, no funerals, go to work.
I love that. I grew up with, or I've watched my son grow up, and ever since he started playing soccer at like 2, he's the kid who will run down the field with the biggest smile
That's
on
the
his
best.
face. And he's just like, I love being here.
Yeah.
And you see him on the ice and he's dedicated and he shows up and he does his best now. And he's found that confidence and he's tiny but mighty. He's about the smallest kid on the ice right now, but also the fastest. And what's been so interesting is he doesn't have the killer instinct of like a Kobe or a Michael on where he's like, I must win.
He's too young to need that right now.
But what he has that I love that I think is a sustainability is such a love for what he's doing that it doesn't matter if he's won the game by 10 or lost the game by 10, which is a blowout in hockey.
Right.
He's got that same, just like, it was good. I had fun. It was a lot of fun. And I love what I'm doing.
Contest, it doesn't make a difference whether you won or lost. You're eating cake.
That's right.
Okay. And this is what's so important, what we need to teach our kids. And there's a point in time when you need to learn to step on someone's neck.
That's right.
Okay. Don't get me wrong. I understand that. And I think there's in it, but we teach it too early.
That's right.
We don't teach the love. And you know what this translates to adult performance and this into longevity is that defining purpose is critical. Having a reason to, we already talked about the environment's pushing back on us. We need to have a reason to put energy into pushing back against the environment. And the love, having something on the horizon, something to work towards, something moving towards us. Listen, as an athlete, you want that tournament out there. Okay. But again, it's a cake eating contest. You get to the tournament and you know what? It hurts to lose. Right. Don't get me wrong. But I don't define, it's not wins and losses. It's wins and opportunities to learn.
That's right.
And
that's sustainability comes from that.
That's where flow comes from. Right. That's the best part of it. You know, it's no fun going out and whipping someone's ass. You know, it just isn't fun.
It's boring.
But when someone can challenge you and push you, oh my God, that's the best.
I love that. And I think, you know, the typical high achievers, basically like with corporate athletes, if you will, I feel like they are these corporate athletes, but they have worse recovery protocols. Yeah,
they're tough. That as I work with people like this, you know, our challenges, you know, I talked about purpose.
Right.
Okay. And I believe that performance comes in, I call it Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Right.
There's a story in there about rocks in the jar. Okay. Getting the big rocks in the jar. And the jar for me is purpose.
Okay.
What is it that you wake up to do that gives you the energy to push back? You're pushing back against an environment that's limiting movement. Movement is critical to human success. It drives it. Nutrient-dense food. You've got to have the nutrients on board so the movement can work its magic to create the synthesis of all the things that do this.
Right.
Sleep. You can't hack sleep, but you can hack the sleep environment and get circadian alignment. This is aligning back to our natural evolutionary response to what we do. My 4th rock in the jar is light. Embracing nutritive light, eliminating toxic light. It aligns with the circadian alignment that we talked about in sleep. Now, I've added a 5th rock to my jar recently. And I used to consider this gravel, not a rock, but I think you have to look at community as a rock. And so all of those you have to think about. You don't have to go the long way. You don't have to go the hard way. You can hack them all. Okay. Be smart. Okay. The environment's smart. And that's why we evolved to where we're doing. We're smart. We can do these things. And oh, by the way, now when we look at when we look at the body and we look at the central nervous system, and we then look at the autonomic portion of the central nervous system and its ability to maintain and operate in a stressful environment, we can now measure that. We now have this really good objective tools for measuring that through a thing called heart rate variability.
So tell me a little bit more about HRV for people who know nothing about it. They've maybe heard the term, but they don't really understand how to apply it to their life.
So HRV stands for heart rate variability. So we all recognize heart rate as the number of beats your heart makes. Okay. So with a heart rate of 60, my heart beats once every second. Beat, beat, beat. Now, depending on the status of my autonomic nervous system. So let's explore that for just a second. Your central nervous system has two sides. There's a mechanical side that lets you move your arms and do all the things you do. But then we have the side of our nervous system that we don't have to think about. It's automatic. It makes our heart beat. It makes our lungs breathe. It does that. That's the autonomic system. And it's very stress oriented. It drives it through what's called the vagal nerve. The vagal nerve is one of the 12 cranial nerves. And if we're sitting in a room and a lion walks through the door, from our eyes to our amygdala says, that's a bad thing. You probably need to move. The amygdala tells the hypothalamus to tell the pituitary to dump all the hormones so we can get the F out of here.
Right.
Okay. So that's sympathetic stimulus. Okay. Once we get away from the lion, if we're out walking the savannah and we get away from the lion, we climb up in the tree and we recover. We become parasympathetic and we recover. Well, our challenge now is our lions are not kitties. They're the IRS, and there are work, and there are phones, and there are things beeping all the time. Listen, when the lion walks through the door, you get a big dopamine drop too.
Right.
Because the body says, I'm going to make you as happy as I freaking can because I know what you're getting ready to go through is going to be rough. Now, no one's going out and poking the lion because they want a dopamine drop. But that's just the relationship that's there. There's a positive part to that. Well, when your phone buzzes or your Apple Watch buzzes, it's counting on that dopamine. It's where social media works. It's the worst. It's the worst stimulant to this part of our central nervous system. So going back to the autonomic system and variability. So we talked about 60 beats a minute. Once it boom, boom, boom. Well, when my autonomic system is very parasympathetic, very rest and recover, it goes boop, 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 boop. It's variable. Still 60 beats a minute, but variable. So this is what we learned. We learned it from the Russian space program. There was a cosmonaut that was having health problems, wound up having appendicitis. They saw this and they diagnosed it through HRV looking at the EKG. The Finns took this technology and commercialized it. And put it in wearable tech and things like that. So that's what HRV, and that's what, Oura Rings is a Finnish company. Polar is a Finnish company. Garmin got their algorithms for their HRV from a Finnish company called Firstbeat. So the Finns are very good at this. And I happen to have worked for one of those companies, and I know the guy that was one of the designers of the Oura Ring.
Wow, yeah.
Because I spent time working at Polar, and this is where I learned about it.
Excellent. So typically when somebody's going through some sort of stress, I'm curious why you think two people can go through the same workout, same stressor, same kind of travel schedule. One, they both having a bad night's sleep, but they have totally different HRVs.
So let's take those two people and let's have them walking down the sidewalk.
Right.
Okay. One has a very low HRV, very low, what we call bandwidth. Okay. And the other one is high, and a snake crawls across the ground. The person with the high HRV and the high bandwidth looks at the snake and sees a black snake or a garter snake and knows it's not a threat. The person that's under threat, that has low bandwidth, sees a rattlesnake. Okay. And this is just protection. Okay. That's just the nature of the process. But the problem is most of us are running on low bandwidth because you have to intentionally invest in recovery. Right. It has to be an intention. I've talked about this as the stress being a 4-leaf clover. The one leaf of the clover is the trauma profile that you bring to that day.
Right.
Not even though you and I may be humans with white skin and former college athletes, we might even gone to school. It might have been in the same sport, but the day before we got to campus, we may have totally different experiences.
Right.
You may have come from an abusive household. There may have been poverty. Listen, I grew up in a household that was impoverished. Yeah. We carried water, we shit in a bucket, we showered at wrestling practice, to get a shower. That has an impact.
Absolutely.
The question is, do you let that define you? Or do you move past it? And do you develop? So then we can go back and build that bandwidth other ways. So we have our portfolio. Number 2, we have practices. There's a reason why religions have prayer. Okay. Right. It's essentially meditation. Now, when I work with professionals, when I start talking about prayer, I always have to ask the question, tell me about your religious tradition. And because I grew up Southern Baptist.
Right.
I grew up in a church. We went to church 3 days a week, mainly because that's where the girls were. Okay. We lived on a farm. We didn't live in the town. I mean, the girls were at church. Okay. So that's what we went there. Now, we went to a church where it was fire and brimstone, revelation based 9 months a year. Your feet got hot because you're pretty sure hell was coming through the floor. My wife grew up Catholic. And I went through RCIA with her after we were married because she wanted to get confirmed. I said, great, let's go do it. So I learned the whole thing. It was funny, because I grew up in a church where there was scripture reading. I read the Bible front to back. That was part of the right. That was a rite of passage as a teenager back then. And I know this stuff. And literally the only guy, this fat little friar that was running the RCIA and me were the only two that ever read it. And we used to have great debates. I was the born in the wool Protestant, and he was the Catholic guy.
Right.
But when I'm working with people now, I ask, what is your faith tradition? And because if you're praying out of fear, you're generating a sympathetic response. If you're praying for guilt, it's a sympathetic response. Okay. I had a very good friend. His name was Dr. Raouf Garbo. He was a teammate of mine, and he's now a pain management doc out in the Virginia Beach area. And he said that stress only exists in either the regret of the past or the fear of the future. Mm-hmm. When you're present, there is no stress. And then you relate that back to like flow concepts, concentration on the task at hand, clear goals and feedback, the things that come with flow. They line up perfectly. So our challenge is as two athletes coming in with completely different, but being in the same place. Why does someone respond differently? We don't know what their background is. We don't know what they've learned to manage. Are they making their stress worse with prayer? I no longer believe in a angry God. I believe in love. Okay?
Love that.
And that's what my prayers or meditations go towards. I don't need that negative. I've moved past it. And frankly, when you look at the whole concept of a God is a whole nother, that's a whole nother level. But so going back to your original question, how can two people have different response? Because we bring different portfolios. We have different practices. We have different nutritive backgrounds. So when we look at anandamide, exercise, the underlying nutrients, the ability to impact the amygdala, there'll be a difference there. And then finally, there's different mechanical practices as well. Those are the 4 leaves of the clover. And I didn't really understand all of this until I went into the cannabis business. And it was really interesting because I left Ohio State, where I'm doing this really, we're measuring 3.5 million data points on a wrestling team in a season. We've won a national title. I've got Olympic medalists. I'm working with amazing people. But I was a virus. I personally was a virus at Ohio State, and their immune system was pushing back on me hard because I wasn't following the groove of everybody else.
Right. Okay.
Because if I had followed the groove of everybody else, I wouldn't have been successful myself. So that's the nature of me.
I love that.
But we go back to this, and so I through this work with HRV, going from Polar to Ohio State, and the other work I did, I had a buddy that I worked with at a wearables company in New Mexico, who we both left. I went back to teaching. He went up into cannabis in Oregon, and he's sending me notes. Hey, what do you know about this? What do you know about that? And I'm like, okay, this intrigues me. I want to learn about this. Right. And he calls me one day. He says, you want to work in cannabis? I'm like, yes, I do. And he offers me 3 times more than I was making at Ohio State. And I'm like, okay, this is, the inevitable deal you can't refuse.
You found the gold rush.
Yes, it was good. And so, but I moved to Florida. My wife and daughter are still in Ohio. And I'm sitting there one day at my apartment thinking, what the F did you do? You leave this great job and now you're selling weed in South Florida. That was the reductionist view of this,
Right.
And I'd listened to this podcast, and it said you can't define yourself based on your training. It says define yourself on your mission, your personal mission. And being on my own at that time, I had a lot of time to think and write and work. And I developed a personal mission of helping individuals understand the changes necessary to alleviate suffering and contribute to the betterment of well people.
I love that.
And now you'll notice I didn't say change people. I teach. It's your choice to change or not. Okay. And, I believe in the psychology of Prochaska's work, Changing for Good, Stages of Change things. I believe in that wholeheartedly. And getting people in there's 2 steps. You gotta make the benefit greater than the hassle of change. And then they have to believe they can do it. Self-efficacy. Right. That's critical in all this. I teach this. I teach flow and I teach stages of change whenever I teach behavior, exercise behavior. But so this was a key element. And that's when I came up with that personal mission. So that was an important part. Learned about cannabinoids and how they work.
I want to get into that a little bit, the endocannabinoid system. So my introduction to cannabis, specifically,
much like it was for me back in the day.
I was 14 years old. I was starting on the basketball team. I messed up and I missed one of the tryout days because they moved the time. They said, you're right after school, and I missed them saying that. So I thought I was showing up early to the later tryouts, and I go from starting on the A team to cut from both teams after he made me run 40 suicides.
Great rules, right?
Not a great thing to do to a player who misunderstood something and thought he was early.
Right.
So my response, it ended up leading to a little implosion of my friend group. I end up becoming friends with kids who are a year older, who are some of the best wrestlers in the school, some of the best swimmers in the school. And they introduced me to marijuana.
Yeah.
And they introduced me in a way where one of the guys had just met his dad, who had owned Simpson Motorsports, and who had just met him at 19 and said, I'm sorry I wasn't present. Here's all the money, all the things, all the everything you want at 18. So we had marijuana coming from India, Hindu Kush, the greatest stuff coming to this tiny little town. And for me, for somebody who didn't feel like he fit in this particular town, what I found was it was kind of what helped me, quote unquote, get through prison. And as an athlete, what I would do would be gym class. I'd be wearing jean shorts. So kind of like I have jeans on now, I'd be wearing jean shorts. I had my hitter box here. And our gym teacher would be like, hubba, let's go. He was the wrestling coach. And everybody would start walking around the school. We didn't have cameras back then. I'd sprint around the school. They'd be like, you guys got to be like Brown. And I'd be over here so I could have my hitter box. So we let everybody catch up and I get back. And then I drive to swim practice. And I get to swim practice at 6 a.m. I would have my Mountain Dew, my joint, and I'd go swim laps and get into flow and into Zen state my senior year. So during that time, there was using it as a way to just kind of cope. But then as I started studying things like exercise phys, I started hearing about the endocannabinoid system. And I was like, what? There's actually that naturally within our body.
Science. Yeah.
And there's science behind this. And this isn't just some escapism thing. It's actually a peak performance tool. So I'd love to hear how you found it as peak performance more than just being in there, and then how you now see this being used as a high performance tool.
Yeah, that's interesting because that was not my experience. Our strain was a thing called Meigs County Gold. So Meigs County is in this national park in Southeast Ohio, and they had a version of Acapulco Gold, and Grateful Dead, and Willie Nelson used to come through to get this strain.
Wow. Okay.
So it was
legit.
So that's what we had, which was interesting. But and I only used in the off season. I never used during season. Yeah. We drank a lot, which is another issue. But yeah, that was our experience. And I remember back in the day, I'd finished up wrestling. I was in grad school, and we had one particularly eventful night, and we had smoked a bowl of hash. And I woke up the next day and I thought, what the F are you doing? This is right when Lenny Bias died.
Oh, yeah.
And back then, marijuana, hash, cocaine, there was no difference in anybody's mind. Now there's a huge difference chemically and its effectiveness. And I stopped. I don't have that addictive gene. But then I start understanding HRV. I start seeing it applied. We applied it at a lot of levels. And then I go into cannabis and I'm like, whoa, because I didn't learn about the endocannabinoid system until I went into cannabis in 2018. And I've been teaching exercise phys for 20 years.
Wow.
It's not in the textbooks.
No, it's not.
And it still isn't. By the way, HRV is just barely cresting the textbooks now, barely.
Interesting.
But so that was the interesting change there. But when I did the deep dive into understanding the amygdala, understanding anandamide, understanding the system that cannabis is influenced, it gives you a whole new look at the plant. And the fact that you don't need all these other molecules.
Right.
I don't work with THC.
Yep.
It's not a molecule for me. It's
Me neither.
anxiolytic. It doesn't do it. I do a lot of work with the other cannabinoids, particularly CBDA. The terpenes are incredibly important. I don't think the cannabis industry, they pay homage to the terpenes, but I don't think most people really understand them and the metabolic impact. There's only a few people that do. Most dispensaries you go to can't tell you what the terpene distribution is in a product.
So can you describe terpene?
Sure.
Most people just know the Maryland terpenes. That's about as close as they get to a terpene.
So a terpene is a plant molecule.
Yeah.
So we essentially recognize it as essential oils. Okay. So if you have the purple plant, lavender.
Lavender.
If you have lavender, it makes you restful.
Right.
Well, the terpene in there is linalool. That's the molecule. It's linalool. If you combine linalool with limonene, if you smell lemongrass, lemongrass, that's limonene. Okay, and that's an energizing scent. Different terpenes together have different effects. Myrcene is a pain relieving molecule. We recognize myrcene in what we call the indica blends of cannabis, or if you ever drink a heavy porter beer, that's a myrcene dominant beer. It puts you in the couch. It really sedates you.
Yeah.
So myrcene. If you go into a pine forest, you have that smell, that's alpha and beta pinene. That's what you smell in pine sol. So most terpenes are solvents for the most part. But what we know is what we've learned is we can take the terpenes. They talk about the fact that in cannabis, THC and CBD are the drivers, but are the power, but terpenes steer the experience.
And then are the terpenes ingested, or is there an olfactory sensor, or all of the above?
Yeah. All the above. Transdermal, olfactory. I don't care for across the lung ingestion.
Right.
Okay. Your lungs were not made to absorb smoke or oil. And
agreed.
So I'm fine with ceremonial. The Native Americans will smoke tobacco ceremoniously. But
they don't inhale. In a lot of cases, well, I've been trained in certain indigenous shamanism, and when we pass around the peace pipe, they're like, don't inhale. Yeah. Like, wow, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And when you do, it hacks.
Right.
I've made that mistake.
It smokes you. And I had double pneumonia, code sepsis, near-death experience in 2019. And to me, after losing my lungs and having to rebuild them, nothing gets smoked in here.
I am not putting lungs. Yeah.
Heck no.
Well, have you had a chance to do a Native American sweat lodge experience?
All the time.
I love those.
Incredible.
That's one of my favorite things in the world. And it's now I'm a huge sauna guy. Back in 20 it would have been 2020. Yeah. We were hiking out here. We were up above the Eisenhower Tunnel on Loveland Pass. And I had 5 knee surgeries by the time I was done wrestling in 85. I had my 6th about 4 years after that. I popped an ACL out in Copper Mountain. And that was my 2nd ACL, so I couldn't go without 2. And so I had one rebuilt. I had my left one rebuilt. And I go 27 years with no problems.
Right.
Well, we're hiking up on the Eisenhower, and I've got loose bodies in my knee starting to lock my knee up. And I knew I wanted to keep hiking. And so I go in surgically to have those loose bodies taken out. Well, I got a MRSA infection. And I was very ill for 2 months. Went back a week later, had another surgery to clean the MRSA out. They put a PICC line in me. I was on IV antibiotics for 2 months, in bed for 2 months. I mean, I was ill. So the day before I had the 7th knee surgery, I rode my bike for an hour that day. I expected to be riding my bike the next weekend.
Right.
I wrestled Olympic trials 11 days after a knee surgery one time. Okay, so I can do pain.
Right.
Okay, not the best decision I ever made, but I can do it. This was awful.
Oh.
This was awful. So I lose an incredible amount of fitness over those 2 months.
Right.
And I come out of it and I can't ride. I can't do anything. So I order a sauna. I go in and I order a sauna. We put it in my office. It was a regular Finnish sauna. And I literally start my rehab with sauna. Then I use what's called blood flow restriction training in the sauna to magnify the effect. Well, sauna is so important to me now that my wife and I live in an RV and we travel the country.
Right.
I put a sauna in my RV.
So amazing.
That was part of figuring that out. I have an infrared sauna. It's not a full Finnish sauna, but it's really important. When you look at these tribal practices, look at Scandinavian saunas, American sweat lodge, fasting, prayers, chanting. All these things go back and modify and affect the autonomic nervous system.
Yes.
These are all tools for driving parasympathetic switch. Okay.
Love that.
Now, so this is as we're figuring this out. And then, so I had my experience at Ohio State where we were able to predict success using HRV.
Expand on that.
Well, so I first learned about HRV when I was working for Polar.
Yeah.
And they released a group of products, God, it's been 30 years ago now, that were called Own Index and Own Zone. Now, back then, as an exercise physiologist, you were taught to establish training levels by doing a max VO2 test, and then you backed into the training zone from the max, which means I put someone on a treadmill, I put a mask on them, I wire them up, and I George Jetson them off the back. Yeah. And right before they George Jetson off, I get max, and then I work in it. And I thought, that doesn't seem right to me. It seems like a good research tool. It doesn't seem like a good applied tool. Yeah. Well, I see this paper at Polar that says, well, we have this technology on their monitor. You hit the button, you sit for a minute, you stand for a minute, you walk for a minute, you jog for a minute, you run for a minute. And along that way, it establishes what they're doing is they're looking at HRV, and it levels out and it establishes the onset of exercise of aerobic benefit. It's the bottom of the zone.
Wow.
Okay. Not trying to get into that. It tells you the bottom. I'm like, oh, that's much more elegant.
Definitely.
And then you
and applicable.
Oh, yes. It makes all the sense in the world. Well, so I pick this up and I'm using this and then I leave Polar. My daughter's born. Back when I was with Polar, I was on an airplane 50 weeks a year, and I was not going to be that dad. So when my daughter got to a point in her life where I needed to be there, I left that job. I started a small business in the town we lived in, Granville. It's called Lemonade Neighborhood Fitness, very high-tech personal training studio.
Cool.
And I started applying the use of HRV in my assessment. So I did a lot of work with police and fire. And so these guys would come in. I actually had a police officer one time. And I knew this guy. We went to grad school together. And he comes into my lab, and it's 9 o'clock in the morning. And I got to where I was routinely putting a heart rate monitor on everybody before their assessment and measuring their HRV.
Okay.
So I put this on, and this guy's is really low. And I'm like, John, when's the last time you slept? He goes, what are you talking about? I go, when's the last time you slept? He goes, how do you know that? And I said, don't ask me questions. I'm asking you questions, officer. He said, I just got off midnights. And I'm like, okay, that tells me a lot. Now, in the absence of that test, in the absence of that HRV test, I put this guy on the treadmill. I do all this work, and the tests are completely invalid because he's not ready for it. But luckily, I had put this heart rate monitor on, and it told me something. So he came back later on. We did the test, and it was all good. And then, so that was a routine part of my practice. And then the new wrestling coach at Ohio State had come in, and he wanted worked up, and I did the work with him, and he just liked the work I did. Well, he calls me 2 years later, and he says, I've got a wrestler I need you to do a study on.
Right.
I said, okay, bring him over. You know, this was 9 a.m. Sunday morning. He had wrestled 7 p.m. Friday night. So he should have been fully recovered. Yeah. Walks into my facility. I wire this kid up. His HRV is the equivalent of yours if a lion walked through the door. I'm like, that's an issue. I have him go lay down in the facility. It climbs 10x. He stands up and it drops back down as if a lion walked in. And so I knew a lot right there. We used to call this overtraining. How many teammates did you had who were ridiculously talented,
right,
and they just disappeared? We'll talk more about this with trauma here in a minute. But so I work him up. He does about half of what he can do. And I said to the coach, I said, listen, here's what's going on. This kid is maladapting to his training. I don't call it overtraining anymore. He's maladapting to his training. And far be it from me to tell a coach how to train his athletes.
Right.
I'm not telling you that. I'm just saying this guy's maladapting to it.
This is just the end result.
Yes. And he says, what should we do? I said, you have to start training him for what he can do, not what you think he should do. And this kid's really talented, 3-time Pennsylvania state champ. He's a really talented wrestler. So I essentially modified 9 workouts. When it came right down to it, that's what I did. I went into the wrestling room. I put a heart rate monitor on him. I had, and when we had calculated his threshold heart rate at 167 beats a minute, he starts warming up. He starts drilling. Everything's fine. Light wrestling. Everything's fine. Goes live. Boom, 190. And I'm like, you're out. Well, the other coaches look at me like I've got 3 eyes. Yeah. Like, what are you doing? And I'm just like, he's not prepared for this.
Right.
They walked away. So keep working with this kid. We get him through Big Tens, and I don't need to tell you how big wrestling is in the Big Tens. I mean, we get him through Big Tens, we get him to nationals, and I do a little bit more work in between Big Tens and nationals. Well, this kid makes All-American. Finishes 5th in the country. Ohio State had a kid who won his 4th national title. Only 4 kids had done it to then. We had 3 freshmen that were All-Americans. 1 second, 1 second, and the third one was 3rd. So they all were 4-time All-Americans. And this one means we win a national title. So I've got a ring from that.
That's incredible.
Then all of a sudden, those coaches are like, okay, what is this voodoo you have?
Right.
And so the head coach said, I want you on staff. And they make an offer, and I take it. I was a sucker. I shouldn't have done it. It was not enough money. And but I learned a lot.
Right.
And so one of my old teammates gave me another device, this First Beat device that I talked about. And we start to do a study. This is 16. And my Olympic gold medalist has the highest HRV on the team. And we can work our way down. And the guys that had gone to nationals who didn't make All-American were below a certain threshold. And I got to where if you don't have 75 milliseconds of HRV when you go to nationals, you don't make All-American. If you're below 70, you won't make it. And is it double-blind peer-reviewed? No, but it's evidence.
It's experiential.
It's huge evidence.
Yeah.
So we figured this out. So by 17, we're investing in recovery. Okay. Luckily, Ohio State was in a relationship with the Air Force Research Lab at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. They came to me and said, listen, we like the work you're doing. What do you need? I said, I need hardware. So I went to where I could measure 1 guy a day to where I'm measuring 16 guys a day.
Wow. So
I've got my whole starting lineup plus 6 more. We've got heart rate monitors on 16 wrestlers live wrestling. We found these shirts that Polar made that I could put the transmitter between the scapula. They didn't have to wear it on their chest. And I'm getting live heart rate data from wrestling rooms. All the guys had heart rate transmitters if they're lifting, conditioning, or doing anything else.
Jeez.
So we've got this real program going. So by 2018, so I've now used HRV to diagnose a problem.
Right.
Okay. I'd gone to the coach on 2 different occasions. Oh, this was an amazing experience we had. So this would have been 17.
Okay.
Yeah, this would have been 17. We're making another run for it. We're doing good. We'd sent the guys home for holiday between Christmas and New Year's. I think this was a day before New Year's, so they all came back, and we've got 1 more block when I can bury them. Yeah. And just really go after it. Otherwise, then we're in season, and I don't have a good deep training block. So the guys come back, and we've got a practice plan to bury them. Okay, we measure HRVs, and I go to the coach. I go, we can't do this. I got the worst HRV measurements of the entire season that day. And what I learned is family stress is worse than physical stress from wrestling. Ooh. We had to give the guys a day to recover from family. And we've talked about trauma. We've talked about this stuff. This was a thread that led through the whole thing. And so we gave them a day. They all recovered. We missed a day on that training block. That's okay. But we then got a hard training block. And so that was a huge learning experience.
Fascinating.
And then the last year I was there in 18, we were investing in recovery. We were teaching recovery breathing. Sensory deprivation floated the kids 140 times that season.
Wow.
Oh, we invested in it. We spent money on it. And had 10 guys qualify for nationals, first time in school history, 8 All-Americans, most in school history ever, even to this day. 8 All-Americans. I could have told you the 2 that wouldn't make All-American the first day of the tournament. So now I've used HRV to diagnose, to prescribe, and to predict.
Mm-hmm. So I want to dig into something that you were getting at there with regards to recovery and its effects on HRV. What type of recovery tools have you found best for elevating HRV?
You can't fix HRV without sleep.
Yeah. Can't
do it. You have to fix sleep. And that can be a challenge sometimes. One of my wrestlers, this was kind of a cute story. So Kenny, the first kid, part of the 9 days I recovered, I also had a talk with him about his sleeping environment. And I said, you have a girlfriend? Yes. Well, he brought his girlfriend to one of the training sessions. So I'm like, so I knew he had a girlfriend and she was pretty clingy. And I said, so are you guys living together? He says, no, but we sleep together. And I said, okay. I said, this is going to be hard, but I need you sleeping in your bed by yourself. Okay. I don't care what you do before you go to sleep. If you're her place and you do whatever you want to do and then go home and sleep in your bed, I wouldn't make her do the walk of shame.
Yep.
Just my advice.
Smart.
So they got it worked out, and he starts and he turned his bedroom into a cave. Yep. We lowered the temperature. We blacked it out. So that was a big part of it. One of my other wrestlers. So we were doing these long studies, these 24-hour studies, and I see this kid that's not recovered. He's not getting the sleep-like recovery that I expect. And I'm like, Micah, do you have a girlfriend? He's like, yeah. And I said, does she live with you? He goes, yeah. And I said, does she ever own an apartment? He goes, no, she lives with me. And I go, do you have a 2-bedroom apartment? He goes, no. And he goes, what's wrong? I said, well, I'm trying to figure out a way for you to sleep by yourself. And he goes, well, I can ask her to sleep on the couch. I go, no.
That's how you don't have a girlfriend again.
Yeah. Well, and I said, no, listen, we had to accept it. Right. Now, he and this young lady have been married. They have a great family. It's a wonderful right. thing. So some things you don't have control over.
That's right.
Okay. We have to make adjustments.
Yeah.
So you learn along the way. You try to educate. We try to adjust. Okay. So sleep is critical.
Yeah. I have a daughter who's a type 1 diabetic. So I've got her monitor on at all times.
Yep.
And so we have the unplanned variables of lows and highs during the night, which throws off sleep and makes me look at nap time and meditation time and breath work time and other variables.
Huge.
And to me, it's very similar to the resilience of what you had, where it's like control the controllables.
Well, you have an athlete that's functioning without an organ.
That's right.
Okay. It happens to be her pancreas.
That's right.
Now, any other organ fails, she's not even there.
That's right.
We've luckily learned how to manage the hormone insulin.
That's right.
And technology's given us tools. It's going to be interesting to look at that. Right now we measure blood sugar.
Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting for the day that wearable can measure insulin and cortisol, which I believe is close. I believe it's very close.
Yeah.
And again, you start to layer in insulin, cortisol, HRV, heart rate. Now we're starting to flirt with Star Trek tricorder in bones. You remember when he used to take, again, you got to be a Star Trek guy, and a diagnose, he'd rub it up. We're flirting with that right now. Okay.
Epic.
So you're doing that with your daughter. So, but I go back to, I talked about the rocks in the jar.
Right.
Maladaption is going to result in poor HRV. We know that. Data's clear. So what do we need to do? Well, most athletes don't have to worry about purpose. That goal is usually laying out there. It's pretty easy to do. We have to think about it as adults and as grandparents. But for that athlete, we know the goal. We know the purpose. I think it's critical that we teach an athlete how to love the sport. We've already talked about that. Nutrient-dense food. I was involved in a conversation with college athletes who were talking about kids moving into apartments. And they're like, what should the criteria be? I said, you should ask them if they can cook their own food. Can they create a menu, go to the store, buy the food, cook it, and create a meal? If they can't, they live in an apartment and they eat in the commons. They eat in the commons.
I love that.
Or else when you go to their house, it's full of pizza boxes and wing boxes. Okay. So we know the nutrient density is dropping dramatically. And with this new phase of sport we're in, we're seeing these kitchens and these commons and these training tables that can be very elite. But not all sports get access to that.
Right.
So are we getting nutrient dense food? And are we supplementing? One of the challenges is that the dogma of sport nutrition, and I call it dogma because it isn't necessarily good science.
Right.
Okay. It's the dogmatic belief that we teach in nutrition. Well, we know there's micronutrients that we haven't identified. NAD, NADH in an athlete with an energy problem. I know no college, they're not supplementing that.
No.
Listen, I was taught, one of my former athletes, I coached women's volleyball back in the early 90s. I was a sports scientist with the women's volleyball team. We were second in the country. We swept the Big Ten. We had a great program. Well, one of my athletes now she's from Toronto. She lives up there and she has a daughter that's on the Canadian national canoe team. Junior on that. She calls me one day, okay, I want to ask you questions about Izzy and so forth. And we're talking about, she said, should she be taking creatine? And I'm like, well, how long's her event? She said, never more than 2 minutes. And I go, that's not a yes, that's a hell yes.
Yeah.
She said, but her nutritionist said she should just get it from normal sources, which is dogmatic nutritional advice.
Right.
Okay. No, you should get it from natural sources. And it's the most studied, safest supplement in the world.
Ever.
It costs very little. It's certainly within your budget. Yes, you should supplement it 10 grams a day. So we made some other recommendations on ketone esters and things like that. This kid didn't miss a podium that summer.
Jeez.
And is probably going to be in LA.
Wow.
Wow. It just pushed it over the edge. And oh, by the way, her nighttime resting HRV is $185. So, there's lots of vectors on this thing.
Right.
So this is you've got to be careful about the dogmatic nature of those that are advising either your athlete, your parent, or your grandparent, because, too many strength coaches, it's about their program. Okay. The idea that the 50-meter swimmer and the 10,000-meter swimmer are in the same strength and conditioning program is laughable. The idea that the 125-pounder is doing the same strength and conditioning program that the 285-pound heavyweight's doing, that's a joke. The idea that the middle blocker on the volleyball team is doing the same thing the libero's doing is idiotic. Okay? But it's the coach's program.
That's right.
Okay? And we're in a time we don't have to follow program. We can assess. We can assess and adjust and assess and adjust. We can do that. We have wearable technology that tells us the status of this workout. I don't need to figure out whether they're not pushing themselves or not. I can see it. I can have a heart rate monitor on. And I know if they're at max or not. I know if they're dogging it. I know what's going on. I can see it. We live in a time, and again, I can tell, is this person struggling? You should see HRV scores during finals. You should see HRV scores when someone's fighting with their girlfriend. Okay, you can see it, and we don't recognize it visually. It's not subjectively there. It is objectively there in the data, very much so.
So high achievers, like the busy entrepreneurs trying to balance everything, finding their fitness. It seems like so many of them right now don't understand the importance of bespoke and customization.
Right.
And what they're doing is they're saying, I see this bit, this book, this social media clip, this Rogan episode, and I'm just hodgepodging everything right now. So if they're looking at HRV, wearables, different things, different supplementation, not just the newest, latest, greatest, but customization, where would you say is some of the good foundational places to start?
I'm on record as saying there are two devices that you buy first. A heart rate monitor. Okay. This idea that you measure heart rate like this is laughable. Yeah. It's like an F1 driver determining their speed by counting telephone poles. Okay. It's a joke. When I can put a piece of technology on it, it collects it, puts it in the bucket, and I can make good decisions. Okay.
Right.
Number 2, a heart rate variability measurement tool. Where is my readiness? We didn't start with a 3 million data point year system.
Right.
We started with hundreds of points. One of the first consistent was was graphing weigh-in weights.
Mm-hmm.
I had the guys weigh in every day before and after practice. I simply had the manager record the data and go to a Google form and put it in, and I put that in a graph. So the coaches could see how much weight the athlete cut before they had to make weight. It became very clear. Graphically, data expressed graphically, and we live in a time when this is really getting good. With the application of AI and machine learning, I am really excited about the future. We are not there yet.
Right.
Okay. That right now, Aura keeps theirs to their self, Polar keeps it to their self, Roop is there. Now, most of them are pushing it back through like Apple Health Kit and things like that, but no one is dashboarding this yet. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And taking in the full experience. And so we still have room to go. I personally believe that within a decade, you'll go into your doctor's office, and instead of getting on a scale and measuring your blood pressure, it'll be what's your HRV data and what's your CGM data.
Oh, that'd be great.
Okay. We're not there yet. Medicine's not prepared for that. We're not there yet. But I do believe that's going to be part of it.
So in my work, I do a lot of work on total self-trust. And to me, HRV seems like it's a little bit of a biological mirror around self-trust. I'm curious
we call it a KPI.
How that resonates. Oh, it's a KPI.
Yeah, it's a key performance indicator.
Yeah.
It's about, I'm doing some work with a gal that reached out to me from my podcast, and there's this really good book called Positive Intelligence. And it basically maps right over the autonomic nervous system. Okay. And they talk about saboteurs and sages. Your saboteurs, and this has been really good for me. I'll tell you, it's really upped my game. Listen, we can be judgmental fucks. Okay. And that's just human nature.
Right.
Okay. And the more you fight that, the better off you'll be. Sorry for I like using all
totally
the words.
welcome here.
I like using all the words.
I have a journalism degree, and I approve of that message.
Yeah. So I think it's important to recognize that when you're judging, it's sympathetic.
Yeah.
Okay. You see that as a threat. You're trying to determine how much of a threat it is.
That's right.
Okay. You see someone on the street, and now here's the great thing: when you recognize that you're judging,
right,
it turns off. It then becomes parasympathetic. It's like, oh, you dumbass, you're judging. Back off that. Okay.
Yeah.
I also believe in compassion for not just yourself, but for others. And I think it's important. I think it's very difficult to be really compassionate for someone else until you learn to do it for yourself. You've got to figure that out. And again, when I'm compassionate to myself, I'm giving my system the ability to shift parasympathetically instead of judging myself. Okay. And again, this work in positive intelligence, they talk about judges and sages, saboteurs and sages. And sages are those parasympathetic things you can do. It's a great book. The program is awesome. I'm very impressed with it. So this applies to all areas of life.
That's right.
And listen, do I think kumbaya is on the horizon? No. I think this is one of the flaws in our DNA. Tribalism, things like that. But I do know that whether I define my tribe by the color of my skin or the book that I study to worship or the continent that I came from or something like that, I do know we're all humans.
That's right.
And I can take this another step. I'm an old farmer. I like eating things that had a face. Okay? There's no veganism in my future. But I can have respect for the contribution that animal made to me.
Absolutely.
And that's compassion as well. So love, compassion, forgiveness. Now these are 3 terms that appear in most religious practices. But I think we struggle in our societies to put them out front. In fact, we fail dramatically. But I do think it's something that you can constantly reflect back to so that we can develop the bandwidth, we can build the parasympathetic response, we can build the bandwidth so that when we see the snake on the sidewalk, we have the ability to shift to, oh, that's a garter snake. Let me be kind to that. Here's the other thing. I follow a thing on Instagram. It's called the Snake Wrangler or something like that. And this guy goes out and catches rattlesnakes in Southern California. And oh my God, he is so compassionate. He cares for that. I'll tell you what, I've cut the head off a lot of snakes. As a kid growing up, that wasn't very compassionate. It wasn't very smart.
Right.
They play a role. They're really important in the ecosystem. And I've learned. I would never do that again. But I'm also not going to leave a rattlesnake in an environment where it can hurt a kid.
Yeah.
You got to be prepared. And there's some times when you have to make a hard choice. So, in competition, don't think that I'm soft because I have compassion. Because in a competition, I know when to step on your neck. Okay. And I know when to win. And if the objective is winning, I'm working towards that. And when I get to that point, I will do it.
Right.
Okay.
Harmony is finding the balance of do no harm and take no shit.
I love that. That's really good.
And you need to fit that into, the light dark duality. And it's still coming from a place of compassion. It's still coming from a place of love. But there's also, being in this ecosystem, we need to understand survivalism. We need to understand how to play in this 3D world. Listen, and do it from a place connected to love.
Yeah, as an athlete, I can bury you.
Right.
And when we're done, I can coach you.
Right.
At the same time, you may bury me. You're the first person I'm going to learn from.
That's right.
It's not about wins and losses. It's about wins and learning opportunities.
I love that.
And so as you do that, it all comes together. But the thing is the mechanism prepared for the bandwidth necessary to exert the force to do the work, or have I been spilling cortisol in this thing for weeks, days, months, weeks at a time, and it just isn't prepared for the competition?
Oh, you just reminded me of something I haven't thought about for years. Is could never squat a lot, but I could bench a ton. Yeah, and had most I was 175 pounds. I was doing 405 for 2 reps in competition, 375 and bench. And at Indiana, so I had done this in London in my junior year. My senior year, they hold a bench press competition. So we get ready for the bench press competition. It's the first annual, packed stands. And I'm like, oh, maybe a girl will be interested in the fact I'm benching a lot of weight, which they don't give a crap.
No, they don't.
125 and 350.
That's what we learned.
Learned that the hard way from some shoulder stuff. But I get there. I went through the routine. I get super pumped up. And then I waited and waited and waited. And it was like 25, 35, 45 minutes. And I had just adrenaline dumped. I'd burn out. Yeah. I was so drained. So I get up there and it's like, at 300. And I think a lot of people don't understand that kind of timing and what happens with that burnout and that fatigue. And to me, it relates quite a bit to understanding, like, is the athlete ready to perform, or are you as an athlete, like, showing up to the gym for a particular day? It's not just what's written on the paper. It's how am I feeling now in the moment? And to me, that is part of concierge, is like tuning in, listening, what's going on. And I'm curious your take on that.
Well, I totally agree. In fact, if you go to my website, Train, Recover, Win, you'll see a recommended products there. And if you go into that, there's a thing called the Complete Athlete. And this is a booklet that I wrote last summer. 30 years ago, I started working on a thing called the Athlete Performance Triangle. I had a wrestling coach. This was shortly after I was done at Ohio State. Hey, what can you talk about athlete development? Yeah. And so I did this quick little triangle: physiology, psychology, skills. Well, that was the framework that started 30 years ago. And now it's grown into 15 elements that come out of it. But I also talk about what's called the zero factor. And you know this because you lived through this too. We had some athletes in our world that were gifted. They were touched by God. Okay. You're like, oh my. I mean, we had these in the wrestling room all the time. But they just disappear for some reason. Well, some of them couldn't get the academics right. And I don't care what your bench press is, and I don't care what kind of a swimmer you are. If you can't get a passing grade, if you don't have a 2.0, you don't get to step on the field.
Love that.
So the skills of academics, if you're living in an apartment, you need to have the skills for prepare meals. You need, so if you put a 0 on any of these, the whole thing goes to 0. Now, most athletes like to work on their strength. If I've got a great bench press, I really focus on bench press. And that might be moving the bench press from 8 to 9.
Right.
Whereas if I'll go focus on one of those other 14 that's a 1 and I go to 4, the entire thing goes up 3 points. I can't get 3 points out of that strength. So if anyone's interested in that, that's a booklet. I'm trying to turn it into a video series, but it's on Train, Recover, Win. Look at recommended prize. You'll see it there. So that's where I go back to. It's called The Complete Athlete.
I love that.
The Guide to Peak Performance. And I think, listen, psychology, physiology, and skills applies to if you're a prosecuting attorney, if you're a Wall Street trader, anyone that's in the arena. You know, I one of these days I'm going to memorize that not FDR, the Teddy Roosevelt, the Man in the Arena. That's a great poem. It's someone that's in the arena, that's competing, because what we learn in the arena, or what you have to learn, is that everything outside the arena doesn't count. Okay. I started working with a sports psychologist in 1984. 1983, I made the starting lineup. I was 6-12. Of the 12 losses, I was winning the match when I got pinned. I couldn't get off the bottom. That summer, I went to a wrestling camp in Granby, Virginia, and I became unwritable. So I go from 6-12 to 39-9 in ones, just by being able to get off the bottom. Of the 9 losses, 7 were in dual meet situations in our home arena. I couldn't lose on the road, and I couldn't win at home. Huh. Well, I started working with a sports psychologist on this, and he says, so tell me about the environment. Well, in wrestling at Ohio State, we wrestled in this thing called St. John Arena, 14,221 seats. And we had 25 of them filled because we gave away 23 free tickets. Snow would blow in the floor when they'd open the doors outside. There was no one in this place. And you know what? The only time my parents got to see me wrestle was at home. And if I got anything from my dad, I got his mouth. Okay. So you knew they were in the arena. Yeah. So obviously, he said, so what'd you think about that? And I said, well, it's obviously you don't want to lose. And he said, so do something for me. He says, practice. He says, if you say to a child, don't spill their cereal bowl, what can you plan on? They're going to spill. They're going to spill it. And so he said, listen, this is really hard to do. And he said, unfortunately, the don't lose is the pink elephant. That's right. And you can't not think about the pink elephant. But what you can do is develop yellow squirrels. And yellow squirrels are these little sayings that drive the pink elephant out. You've done the work you need to do. You've lifted the weights. You've been there, yada, yada, yada. These are sages, not saboteurs. Oh, I love it. And this is when I was pretty competitive that 4th year. Tore a knee up in Big Tens, tore an ACL in Big Tens. So I obviously didn't finish. I was wrestling a guy from Indiana, and I tore the ACL in the first period, but I still beat him. But finished the match. It hadn't swollen up yet. But came back my senior year and won a Big Ten title. And it was, a lot of it was understanding how to manage that thought stress. So I'm wrestling Big Ten finals. Right. I'm the only Ohio State guy in it. They do the athlete introduction, like they do before a match or something like that. I went up and climbed in the top of the stands in the arena there at Northwestern, and I fell asleep. I was able to meditate myself to sleep. I naturally woke up at the 167-pound weight class, went down and warmed up, went down and beat a guy who beat me twice that year. And that was using the psychological skills in order to prevent the sympathetic from going off the rails. Right. To keep the parasympathetic in control. Again, Stephen Kotler is one of my favorite authors. That flow state, I believe it is a co-engaged sympathetic state. And it worked out good for me. So I went from the worst guy on the team to I still hold the pin record at Ohio State 40 years later. And if you'd have told me some kid from Barnesville who walked on the team in 1980 would still be getting his name flashed up on the side of the arena.
40 something years later.
Laughable.
That's amazing.
Laughable. But it's just a process. It's a reductive process of figuring things out. What's the variable I need to solve for? And constantly solving for that process. And I think this is what goes into health and performance. You've got to have the ability. I don't think subjective variables are the best. I think you have to have objective variables.
Right.
Your subjective can lead to objective, but you got to figure out a way to convert it.
Okay.
We live in an age of AI. You know, I'm getting ready to have a conversation with the head lacrosse coach from a Big Ten team, and I'm telling them, you need a manager program. One of the reasons I was able to collect $3.5 million, because I wound up finding a manager, and I didn't have a dashboard. One of these athlete management dashboards costs $9,000 a season. Ohio State wouldn't buy it.
Right.
So I go to the big data guy in the Fisher College of Business. He says, I've got an intern for you. So this kid takes 4 Google Sheets, ties them together, writes the code, and we create a dashboard of our own. Oh. It was awesome. It was better than anything I could have bought. It was what'd you call it a minute ago? I'll think about it. Purpose built.
Yeah.
It was purpose built. It was amazing. And it gave me the ability to see data. And again, that's 3.5 million data points floating between 4 different spreadsheets.
And imagine where it's going to go when people can now vibe code all of this stuff. It's incredible.
And I've started doing that now. Yeah. And it's just like now, you know, I'm profoundly dyslexic, so I don't write code. Yeah. But I can vibe code.
And you can talk, so it's going to work really well for you. Yeah. Well, I want to give you an opportunity to ask me a question on anything, you know, your heart desires. Just open it up.
So how excited were you when Indiana beat Ohio State in the Big Ten finals and qualified for the national tournament?
So my condolences for your team's loss.
I got no problem.
And I'm going to say this. To me, it was one of the greatest examples in the history of sports of changing a culture psychologically in a heartbeat.
In 6 months. In 6 months, they did it.
And what he did was he came in and he had the greatest pattern interrupt where he walked into the speech at the basketball game and he was like, F Purdue and F Ohio State too. Yeah. And people went nuts.
Yep.
And when the guy had the gallstones to say, you know, I win, Google me.
Yeah.
He completely shifted the culture. And to me, it's one of the greatest examples in the history of sports, and it's going to be a movie of how important the mind is on the outcome of a physical option. Like, it's mind-blowing.
You know, the fact that he went down, that one quarterback calls his brother out at Cal.
Yeah.
And you wind up with the Heisman Trophy winner and the #1 draft choice as the quarterback. The ability to communicate that one level to your team or to 2 levels so they bring in, listen, you don't win the Kentucky Derby unless you got a bunch of fast fucking horses in the barn.
Right.
Okay. Your next challenge as a trainer, don't break them. Just let them express themselves. And he put horses in the barn and he let them run.
And none of them were 4-star recruits.
No.
That's what's so amazing.
It's beautiful.
And what's so interesting to watch is from a business perspective, Mark Cuban saying, I'm going to sprinkle in a little bit here and I'm going to beta test.
Right.
And once he saw the championship mindset and follow through and everything,
he invested.
And we are now the #1 school for transfer portal for both football and basketball.
It's so exciting.
It's shifting the culture.
Again, I've been in the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry for years.
Oh yeah.
And I love the rivalry.
Yes.
It's so cool. Now, the idea that we would arrest our coach and imprison him because they lost to Michigan, I don't think obviously Michigan did that to the,
right.
I'm just kidding. But we're not going to arrest our guy, but,
no.
But having lived through that is so, and if you don't have the competitor, you don't have the rivalry.
Right.
Dude, I lived through Iowa. Wrestling.
Yes. Iowa wrestling, the mecca.
I'm now living through Penn State wrestling.
Yeah.
Okay. And I see the role. Systems are amazing. what Cal has done over at Penn State, what Dan Gable did at Iowa. And it is not, we still don't know the key elements yet. I think we have an idea. I do believe it lies in love.
Yeah, I agree.
The willing to sacrifice. The programs have got to come in over the top and support. But it's interesting to watch.
And I think that goes into any form of life transformation right now. It's all about learning how to bring out the greatness in people. And are they connected or disconnected from love?
Yeah.
And I always say, in order to get what you want, you must first love yourself as you are.
Have to.
So if you don't know how to love yourself, how can you love your partner, your friend, your people you're doing work with? And that to me is the
or
core
love
of all
that
of it.
person that you're trying to become.
Yes.
Again, this idea that you want to lose weight, to be something, to love yourself, can't do it. You've got to love, because fat loss is hormonal, not bioenergetic.
Right.
Okay. It starts with cortisol. And you cannot, again, this is where it goes back to HRV and the supplements and the things that we do. You have to have that.
I love it. I love it. So want to ask you one last question for today. So based on everything that you do around that system, what does harmony mean to you?
You know, we talked about this before we started recording. I've been thinking the whole time. And I go back to that booklet that I wrote, The Complete Athlete. Harmony is looking at all the elements and seeing balance. The willingness to do the self-exploration, which is hard to do for some people.
That's right.
Okay. Ego's a bitch. I want to find a better word than that. I used it twice today and I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I don't like using an effeminate.
It's your earth guide only.
Yeah. It's really hard. And,
it's your worried mother. It's the water boy shouldn't be the quarterback.
And you know what we talked about it. Yeah. I was the worst guy on the team and set records. Indiana, Jesus Christ, Indiana. I just saw him show up in the big game list for Ohio State this year. And it's like, that never happened.
No.
What never happened before?
No.
Indiana in that list.
Right.
And it's funny. It's going to be
funny.
fun. It's going to be fun to watch.
That's right.
You know, I'm going to be intrigued to see, okay, can he extend this? Can he do it twice?
Just like with Brady, can you do it with a different quarterback?
Right. But now everybody's watching.
Right.
It's not a secret anymore.
Nope.
I mean, it's one thing to go out and win a little bit more, but another one to win the national championship. It's like everybody's looking.
And I can't wait to watch. It's going to be amazing.
It'll be
well,
great.
I want to thank you for coming on. This has been an absolute blessing and so much wisdom. Excited to dive in more to everything you're doing, both with your guidance and your products. And for those who are listening at home, if they want to learn a little bit more, what's the best way to
So if you want to learn about Mode Method, HRV Plus, you can go to modemethod.com. If you want to learn about me, I have a website called trainrecoverwin.com. Don't judge me. I coded this thing. It's not beautiful, but it's functional. You can contact me through there. You can find me on social media, typically Instagram and LinkedIn. I'm not a Facebook guy. I'm not an X guy. And I'm a boomer.
Yeah.
So it's not my first feeling to perform there. But you'll learn a lot. I'm pushing a lot of I have a podcast called 90% Healthy. If you'd love to go listen to some of our episodes, we'd love to have you. Please like, share, and subscribe. And we'll go from there. So Train, Recover, Win, Mode Method, and 90% Healthy podcast.
Well, absolute blessing. Thanks for having you on today.
Thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
All right, my friend, if this episode sparked something in you, don't just wander off into the abyss of the internet. Hit subscribe so you can actually get the good stuff when it drops. And if you're feeling generous or mildly enlightened, leave some love in a review. It takes just 30 seconds, and somehow it feeds the algorithm gods so they notice and more people who really need it. Now, if you want to step deeper into my world, rapidharmony.com is where the real magic lives. Coaching, community, rituals, and a few surprises that are way better than just scrolling around another motivational reel and not doing anything about it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being you. And remember, your inner harmony isn't hiding. It's just waiting for you to pay attention. I'll see you on the next episode. Now go subscribe before you forget.